Most people only look at the night of the disappearance. But what if the most important secret lies in what happened before? Today, we're going to reveal what was overlooked in the McCann family's past and why that ancient silence might be the missing key. Have you ever seen a tree standing after a storm? From the outside, everything seems solid. Straight trunk, leaves still green. But if you kneel down and dig with your hands, you'll feel the soil too soft. You'll see that the root, the one holding everything together, had been rotting for a long time. Only no one wanted to notice, because it was easier to look up at the beautiful canopy than down at the crumbling ground. That's how many people still see the Madeleine McCann case, as if it all started on the day she vanished. As if it were a straight line. One night, one mistake, one missing child. But what if the line was curved? What if the collapse wasn't an accident, but the final consequence of a structure that had been silently cracking for years? There are reports, dates, stray remarks, strange behaviors all from long before that night. And I'm not talking about baseless theories. I'm talking about facts, about scenes that happened, about words that were spoken and buried, like the comment made 2 years before the disappearance, in front of the parents, by a man close to the family and only brought to light because someone chose not to stay silent, like the dinners where adults clinked glasses, while the children slept alone in locked apartments, or like the history of uncomfortable silences is always justified by the image of a good family. This video won't show you what happened that night. It will show you what had been happening long before it arrived. What hurts the most isn't the day of the disappearance. It's what was ignored before it. The way everyone seemed normal. The smiling photos, the friendly dinners, the vacation routine, and yet something was out of place. Small decisions that today sound absurd, but back then, they were brushed off as no big deal. That's what eats away from the inside. When the pain doesn't come from a shock, but from accumulation, from accepted silence, from the doubt no one had the courage to voice aloud. And maybe that's why so many avoid looking at that before, because looking takes courage, and it requires asking uncomfortable questions like, if I had been there, would I have said something? Silence has roots and some are about to be unearthed. If you feel like this case never made complete sense, stay, because what's coming next isn't about the disappearance, it's about what was forming, when there was still time to prevent it. If this unsettles you, subscribe, you'll understand why. From the outside, it was just another middle-class family on vacation in southern Europe. Sun, pool, quiet dinners, everything seemed in place. But sometimes, it's exactly that seeming that hides what no one wants to see. What almost no one talks about is that the group of friends who traveled with the McCanns to Portugal had been repeating certain habits for years. On other trips, they also left the children alone in apartments while they dined. And this was never a secret, it was even normalized. It's close. We take turns checking, they'd say, as if that was enough. But that taking turns, checking was already a crack in the ground. The problem was never a single decision, it was the repetition, the normalization, the comfort in believing nothing would go wrong because it never had before, and because they were all doctors, respectable parents, people with good sense. And when image outweighs instinct, silence starts to grow. At one of those earlier gatherings, a family friend quietly questioned, "Don't you think it's risky to leave the kids alone?" The response came quickly. "They sleep soundly and we check every half hour. Everything's under control." But everything's under control was a polite way of saying, "We're not going to talk about this." This pattern didn't start in 2007. It came from before, from a kind of confidence built on repetition, not on real care. And here's the part that stings. If this was already a habit, how many times did danger knock before it broke in? There are records that, on previous vacations, the children were left alone in their rooms for hours, sometimes with unlocked doors, sometimes with open windows. And the group, they always gathered in the same way. Long dinners, wine, laughter. The impression that everything was under control sustained the habit, but something behind the scenes was already unsettling. Some resort babysitters, interviewed years later, said they found it strange. They heard crying coming from empty rooms. They saw lights on late into the night. They felt an off atmosphere, but no one said anything. And maybe that's the most serious part. It wasn't just the parents' silence, it was the silence of everyone around them, because it was easier to believe in the image of the perfect family than to face the truth of a negligent structure that masked risk with smiles. This sanctification of the McCann family was what shielded the small signs, doctors, religious, well-connected people who would never be questioned in public, because who questions a family that smiles in photos? But while the grass looked green, the soil beneath was already parched, and it was in that soil that everything grew. The repetition of dangerous decisions, the comfort in an unmonitored routine, the absence of alarm in the face of the obvious, until the collapse came. But when you go back in time and look at each small omission, each let it go, each it's just one night, you realize what seemed sudden had been forming for years. Maybe the most uncomfortable question isn't what happened that night. Maybe it's, when exactly did this silence start to grow? As if the ground suddenly went quiet. The revelation that signs came before only shakes the earth when it already seems solid. And that's what happened when we brought up the pre-2007 reports and underground impact. I remember the moment Dr. Gaspar's voice started circulating. In the video, she's tense, holding the phone with a recording of that comment from Payne about Madeleine. The camera shakes. The atmosphere feels oppressive. It's so tangible that any room turns into a courtroom. At that moment, you feel the chill in the air and realize what's at stake isn't whether they failed that night, but that there were chronic failures long before. On the McCann's faces, you see what no one wants to: embarrassment and evasion. Gary blinks, forcing a smile that doesn't hold. Kate lowers her head, her shoulders slump. You can almost hear the sound of old days coming back to haunt, the footsteps of doctors leaving children unattended in resorts, muffled laughter covering the unease. The camera frames Kate's face. She covers it with her hand, swallowing her words, a long, heavy, loud pause that makes the whole audience take a deep breath with her. On the other side, the public cloaks itself in restrained indignation. There's still empathy, but an internal confusion begins to emerge. That silence, that seemed like comfort, now feels like decline. How did no one see? How did no one question before? The mood shifts. It's no longer about the night of May 3. It's about entire years of choices that were never challenged. Dr. Gaspar, I clearly remember the comment, and it's stuck in my throat. And at that moment, the tension stops being just a question. It becomes a weight. It's like the thunder that comes after a cloudless sky, and only then do you realize you've been watching the storm all along. Brief pause, the silence lingers, and the camera zooms in on the narrator's face. Narrator, almost a whisper. There are things only those who've lived through them understand. From there, the ground becomes unstable. The official narrative starts to unravel. The records surface: whispered conversations in hotel corridors, torn notes kept in a file, officials saying it was never a big deal, but the truth no longer fits behind that smile. You see the transition in their faces, not just the parents, but the witnesses and journalists. There's a silence before every answer. The pace slows, as if the words are hard to get out. The evidence is now concrete: the pattern, the environment, the ground softened by old The collapse is described in details so simple they become brutal. A friend details how Payne turned his back to protect an image. A receptionist recalls Madeleine's cries echoing down the hallway. A note, almost lost to time, stands out: we never fully rested. All of this pulls the viewer into a drama that didn't start 18 years ago, it started long before, and now demands answers. The camera zooms in. You feel the ground shake. The video's climax isn't the revelation of a new fact. It's the realization that, behind it all, there was a root waiting to be uprooted. And when we finally see it, it's clear the ground wasn't solid but full of cracks. The tension builds. You take a deep breath with the scene, and what comes next isn't the end, it's a new beginning. Because when the root appears, the only thing left is to decide: do we pull it out now, or let it grow further? It's strange how certain truths only hurt when they fall into silence. That ancient silence wasn't empty, it was decomposing matter, feeding cracks in the family's emotional ground. Now, after pulling the thread of unspoken memories, what remains emerges clearly, like the root that appears. Dr. Gaspar's reports take a stand. She says she heard Payne, in 2005, make an uncomfortable joke about Madeleine's presence at the table, something that felt off but was brushed aside. I imagine Gary tightening his shoulders, looking down, his voice faltering: I had no idea. I thought it was just a silly comment. Kate, silent, looks at her daughter's photo, a calm face, a summer smile. The heart tightens. There's guilt in the air, not the guilt of the day of the disappearance, but the guilt of not hearing the first warning. From the outside, the mansion seemed untouched, but inside, the ground had already given way. The walls carried echoes of a stability built by ignoring signs of unease. The sanctification of the perfect family had become a fortress, preventing voices from being heard. In the silence of the corridors, an echo. How many nights had the parents left the children unattended, believing it would always be fine? How many times did they bury discomfort under the label of socially acceptable? These patterns aren't mere musings, they're imperceptible cracks that turn into structural failures. When the doctor speaks, the tension rises. It's not a courtroom, it's a moment of constant deferral that becomes a fingerprint. I tried to speak, but no one wanted to listen. Her voice trembles, and the atmosphere seems to thicken. That invisible root now pushes through the soil and reveals that everything was on the verge of collapsing. And what if the tragedy didn't begin on the night Madeleine disappeared, but there in that moment when a subtle unease was silenced to maintain appearances? That restlessness leaves a knot in the throat of whoever watches, because, in recognizing this, you also wonder, how many times did you silence what you sensed was strange? The emotional transition comes when Gary pieces each detail together. He sighs, runs a hand over his face. I wish I'd seen it before. I wish I'd allowed myself to hear, to look, to act. At that moment, the case gains a human face. It's not about accusation, but about echoing fragile humanity. The McCann family, like any other, needed to confront their own silences. And there lies the root that needed the courage to be exposed. Now imagine a field. The grass looks green, uniform, but if you dig a little, the soil is dry, cracked. The root that holds everything is corroded. The final revelation arrives. Right here, the harm wasn't an isolated act. It was the result of already compromised ground. Allowing the investigation to overlook these traces proved as significant a choice as any omission on that fateful night. Because, without understanding the dynamics that fed the emotional context, we keep treating symptoms, never the cause. In the final scene, the narrator approaches the camera. The breathing seems slow but heavy. The root was invisible, but it was what held everything together. And when no one wanted to dig, the ground gave way. The camera focuses on the face, almost in a whisper. Madeline's story didn't begin in that dark room. It began in the accumulated silences, in the questions that were never asked. And now, that route is in plain sight. Can you feel it? The breathing slows. The gaze blends firmness and invitation, because it's at this moment that we ask ourselves, who will dig up the next root that's pretending to stay buried? I feel the weight of this in my chest, like something trapped, wanting to break free. The root of silence isn't delicate tears, splits, disrupts the balance little by little. Madeline's story needs to be told from before the disappearance, because when you only look at the moment of tragedy, you miss the ground that allowed it to happen. Between us, I want to say what truly touched me. It's not the climax that shapes fate, but the accumulation of the unspoken, the choices we push to later, and sometimes, later is too late. What stopped you from seeing? A fleeting glance, a comment that gave you chills, a silence disguised as normalcy. Those small signs are the root that sustained everything that came after. And I know, somehow, you carry your own roots of silence at home, at work, in the memories we push to the corner. I can't claim we've uncovered the whole truth. What we've done is open a crack, peel back some layers. It's up to those watching now to decide. Will you leave the root there, hidden, or will you face it? Because when you see, when you understand that harm ripens in silence, everything changes. That feeling that something was wrong, that you might have sensed, wasn't negligence, it was perception. A warning often stifled by the fear of causing discomfort. Between you and me, here and now, I see you looking at the camera, taking a deep breath, feeling this too. Do you sense there's more beyond the after, more beyond the narrative that's been told? Then thank you for being here, for not ignoring. That's already courage. Our fear of digging deep isn't weakness, it's responsibility. It's responsibility, choosing not to lie, even to ourselves. There's another kind of silence, one that grows between people, families, stories that are told, and others that are silenced. In the next video, we'll dive into exactly that. How these silences reflect, in the collective, in the small daily reactions, in the imperceptible absences that, when added up, shape destinies. It'll be a conversation about affection, emotional presence, about everything we fail to say to maintain the appearance of peace. If this stirred you, especially this root no one wanted to pull, this next chapter will offer a new perspective, one that hurts, that unsettles, but also offers relief. If you want to follow this path, subscribe, not for the sake of routine videos, but because every step here is a step together, and when we walk through sensitive terrain, every companion matters. If this conversation echoed within you, the super chat is more than a contribution, it's a symbolic gesture. It's you saying, I saw, I feel, I'm facing this route with you. Each super chat lights a spark in the dark, giving strength to keep telling these stories that aren't being told. It's not about money, it's about being part of this network of silent courage. Those who choose this gesture aren't just spectators, they're guardians of something that deserves to be remembered. And, for that, it also deserves to be cared for. Now what I most want to know is, what did this open in you? Is there an image that lingered, a sudden memory, a feeling you've avoided for so long? Write in the comments. Take your time. It can be just one word, but let it come from deep within. I'll read every message, because it's in this space as you write that the story continues. When you type, when you reflect, when you allow that silent root to become visible, it's already sprouting healing. If it hurt, it's because it still matters. I'm not saying goodbye, I'm inviting you to keep feeling. Because some truths aren't shouted, they're heard when no one's looking. And that look, for me, right now, is in you. Our conversation continues, and I won't stay silent or ignore what's insisted on rising, despite the silence.